Well, we're at our final week. This is our theme. We've had it for the second half of the summer. We've talked about the zeros of the faith, and so this will be our last meeting talking about zeros of the faith. Last week we looked at a man that was a zero in his own time, but over history we look back on him and we said, man, he was more than zero. This man was faithful. So last week we talked about Caleb. People didn't like him during his time, but he turned out to be a man that was full of faith, believed in the promises of God, while the rest of Israel just whined and complained. So he was a bright star in the Old Testament. Well, today, we're going to look at a guy that's exactly the opposite, the polar opposite of Caleb. He is a man that when he comes on the scene is going to be probably the most heroic person that's ever walked this earth. He will be a legend to those who meet him. And biblically speaking, he may be probably the brightest shining celebrity that has ever put on human flesh. But when it all is said and done, according to the annals of God's eternal record, he will go down as the biggest zero of all time. I picked this character, number one, to please Trevor. He wanted me to do something from Revelation, so I pleased Trevor with this, Christina, so you can tell him I did it for him. But second reason I picked him is because this guy is secretly the type of person we all want to be. If we'd be honest, this is what we're striving for. We want his qualities, his characteristics, because they're incredibly attractive. And if we do not stay vigilant, like if we don't watch ourselves, as Psalm 139 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart." If we don't do that, we'll be seduced by his image and to conform into this man's image. And I'm not kidding, because I was for years. He goes by many names, but before I name him, let's read about him in the book of Revelation, chapter 13. We're going to read through verses 1 through 8. Revelation 13, 1 through 8. Here's how it begins. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast. And they asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nations. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. All whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. This is kind of odd and scary, and so let's kind of go through this. So the central character, verses 1 through 8, is clearly a character by the name of the beast. There's a lot of debate about who is John describing here. In verse 1, it gives the pronoun it. So is it a system, government? Yes, to a degree, yes. But later on in verse 18, watch how it personifies this person. Verse 18, this calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. So, it's a man. And who is this man? Verse 1 hints the beast will be someone or something that is driven and directed by the great dragon. That's what it says in verse 1 and verse 4. According to Revelations 12:9 and 22, the dragon is the devil, Satan. So this means the beast will be satanically inspired. In the same way the devil possessed Judas to betray Jesus, so Judas was possessed by the devil, kissed Jesus in Gethsemane, and he went to the cross. The devil will move the Antichrist in the same way. 2 Thessalonians calls him the man of lawlessness. As I said, some people call him the Antichrist. Daniel calls him the ruler. I'm simply going to call him the man. He's going to be the man. Whatever his name will be, no matter what title we give him, he will be like no other man that has ever came before. He will have it all. All. Image, brilliance, miraculous power. He'll be able to do miracles, healing, and most of all, he will be the most persuasive communicator you have ever seen. He'll speak and people will just fawn all over him. He'll be so impressive that according to verse 3 and 4, the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. They actually will worship him. So when you say that, the question is, why would anybody worship a man, any kind of man? I suppose the answer is found in verse 18 that we already looked at. It's kind of found in the number 666. One scholar says, basically, the number 6 in biblical parlance represents the sixth day of creation, when man was made. So he will be, according to 666, a man above men, because biblical triplets always characterize something of immense capacity. So when we say God is holy, we say God is holy, holy, holy. So this is not just a man, this is going to be a man among men. 666. David Jeremiah said he will be the ultimate in human ingenuity and competence. And I'd say the problem with that is we are always on the hunt for somebody to inspire us, a hero. We want to be impressed. We want someone to follow. And when someone's impressive, we have an innate ability or an inborn tendency to exalt the person. I'll prove it to you. It's very simple. Here's how I prove it to you. I just have to ask you one question, and here's the question. Have you ever met a celebrity? And if you have, you will know instantly when you met that person. I was at my sister's rehearsal dinner in Laguna Beach, California. We were at a restaurant. I went up to get a couple Cokes, and standing right next to me in that restaurant was Mel Gibson. Whoa. Awesome. My brother said, hey, Chris, we're going to go to this thing called Cleveland Conference he had an athletic journal, and he goes, there's going to be a famous guy there. We go there, and I got my journal signed by Muhammad Ali. Whoa. And then a couple months ago, I got to meet face-to-face, shake his hand, and get a picture with him, Jordan Peterson. And some of you are like, no way. Way? Huh? Do you know my wife? You know who my wife gave a Christian gospel tract to? The John Schneider. Bo Duke from the Dukes of Hazzard. Yes, sir. Do you know, ironically, Bo Duke now is a Christian. He sings gospel. Could it be correlated? Probably. While I was writing this, I'm typing this sermon yesterday in the afternoon, and I get a text from my son Gio. He plays football at Wheaton. He said, Dad, guess who's coming to practice to speak to us? Tony Dungy. Ooh. Do you feel the excitement when you talk about celebrities, the people that are rich and famous? Man, you ain't seen nothing yet. Nothing yet. When the Antichrist shows up, when the man shows up, he's going to light up the world like nobody else. Oh. He will know he's beautiful. If you know that song, I feel bad for you. So why do we care so much about celebrities? Why do we care so much about sports heroes? Because we were made to worship. Our hearts do it naturally. John Calvin said, the human heart is an idol factory. We constantly fashion and refashion a small g God that will meet our needs. And the biggest problem with that is we become what we worship. The staff actually is going through a book with that same title, We Become What We Worship. And this is the point it keeps hammering, and this is a terrifying point. What people revere, or what they worship, what they idolize, what impresses them, they begin to resemble, either for ruin or restoration. So what you worship, you become. And this is the problem. This is the whole problem. You may be saying to yourself, well, why are we worried about worshiping the Antichrist? He won't be here for years. He doesn't show up until the final chapters of Revelation. Well, according to 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, the spirit of the Antichrist is already at work in the world. It's seductive. That dragon or demonic spirit is working in all of us, trying to manipulate us, and he does not want us to glorify the living God or his Son, Jesus Christ. He actually hates Jesus Christ. So what he does is he gets us to focus on the greatness of ourselves. That's his whole goal, is to get you fall in love with yourself. This same spirit, this same demonic spirit whispers in your ear every day, there's no one like you. You are the smartest, the coolest, the best. You, whatever you think is right or wrong, for you it's right or wrong because you are the one that matters. You look in the mirror and you go, man, look at my biceps. Nobody's got arms like me. I deserve so much more than I'm getting. Everybody treats me unfair. And plus, have you seen my last selfie on Instagram? Whoa. I didn't even need a filter, you know? We become what we worship, and the Antichrist is the biggest narcissist in the world. So we need to take a little bit of time to go deeper and look at what makes him tick. What does the Bible reveal about his character? And then we need to take it as a warning. And the reason why, because if you start resembling him, it may mean you've already been seduced by the Spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient, according to Ephesians 2:2. I am afraid that the qualities the Antichrist possesses describe many of the people who claim the name of Jesus. This should never be, ever, ever. So here's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at what is he like, meaning what is his attitude? Number 2, what does he want? And number 3, how does he feel about his behavior? So ask yourself, do these qualities resemble me? If they do, be very scared. So let's go to Psalm chapter 10. Scholars would say Psalms chapter 10 is the psalm of the Antichrist. How he thinks, how he feels, what motivates him. We're going to spend the rest of our time in Psalm 10, referring back to Revelation. So Revelation 13:5 said, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words. 2 Thessalonians 2:4 says, he will set himself up over everything that's called God. In other words, he's going to be a man of unchecked arrogance. He's just going to be so arrogant and so proud. And unchecked means you can't tell me otherwise. Who are you to talk to me? Who do you think you are? That's unchecked arrogance. He believes he's the center of all things. In him he trusts. He's the star of the show. He believes so much in his own self, his own experience and personal opinions, he believes he can determine what's true, what to believe, what's right and wrong. He's the master of all he surveys. In Psalm 10, what we're going to see is the first thing about this arrogance is it makes him shamefully braggadocious. Like he has no shame and he brags about it. Look at verse 3. He boasts about the cravings of his heart. That means lust, desire, greedy things. I want the best. He blesses the greedy and he reviles the Lord. In his pride, the wicked man does not seek God. In his thoughts, there's no room for God. So he's just kind of gross. Look at verse 5. His ways are always prosperous. Your laws are rejected by him. He sneers at all his enemies. Verse 7. His mouth is full of lies and threats. Trouble and evil are under his tongue. In verse 9 and 10, like a lion in cover, he lies in wait. He lies in wait to catch the helpless. He catches the helpless and drags them off in his net. His victims are crushed, they collapse, they fall under his strength, meaning he has no compassion. He just wants to win. He's the best. I don't care about you. I'm better than you. He's shamefully braggadocious. It's crazy when you go on TikTok, this attitude pervades the whole thing. Have you seen on TikTok or social media where people will make up these new terms and they share their opinions where they believe they have become the expert on anything from how to apply makeup to split personality disorder. I've got 5 personalities, and they become like an expert. People love to invent silly words and speak about them as if they are scientific truth. And if you're ever disagreeing with them, they will call you a hater. Let me just give you an example. Right now, there's this confusing and extremely popular world of gender expression. It fits right into all of this made-up terms. It's crazy. And there's a massive group of people in the digital universe that believes human beings, when they're born as babies, they're born with an infinite number of genders. Infinite number of genders. Online influencers make up terms and expressions, and they expect you better take them seriously. So let me just give you a few of them. You have out there dual gender, demi-boy, demi-girl, gender bender, gender gifted, gender fluid, ipsogender, isogender, metagender, MUXE, M-U-X-E, I don't know what that means, neither gender, non-binary, omnigender, trans male, trans female, trans masculine, trans feminine, trans animal, trigender, two-spirit, winky, X-gender, MAP, M-A-P, that's minor attracted person. But they don't want to tell you that it's pedophilia, so they use this phrase called MAP. Butch queens, femboys, gamers, not gamer, gamers, sapphics, hasbians, diomorics, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And if you ever laugh at one of these terms, you are strange. You are unsympathetic. You are a hater. And the cool new word is you're the weird one. Second thing about the Antichrist spirit is he's going to be openly blasphemous. Verse 3 says, he reviles the Lord. Revile, that means he makes fun of the Lord. He laughs at the Lord. He doesn't care what he says about the Lord. He has no fear of the Lord. That's the point. A book was written 10 years ago and is going around the Christian circles. Especially theologians would read this book. And the title of the book is called A Crisis in the Life of God. That's the title of the book. And in the book, the writer says, Christ did not die for our sins. He died for God's sins. That's what the book says. Christ didn't die for our sins. He died for God's sins. And so it's a slanted teaching that states that anything that ever happens to you that's bad or painful is not because we did anything wrong. No, on the contrary, we're the hapless victims of God's indifference. So when bad things happen, it's simply because God is indifferent. He's callous. When we hurt, it is a clear sign that God willingly chose not to come to our rescue. So really, he is the bad guy. That's why Christ came to die for his sins. A sign that this is starting to leak in, even in the church, is how flippant some people with how quickly they get angry at God. Like it's quick. Why didn't you come to my rescue? You failed me. That sentiment was born in the spirit of the Antichrist. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Revelations 13, 5, 6 says, his mouth constantly blasphemes God and slanders his name because he thinks he's smarter than God. The question is, do you? That's scary. I was doing some more research. When it comes to the average American Christian, we live in what is known as the era of cafeteria Christianity, which means people can claim the name of Jesus, but they only have to follow the beliefs and teachings they agree with. It is more important to be authentic than it is to be faithful and devoted. That's what matters if you're authentic. It's More important to define love the way you want. They pick and choose which sins are actually sinful. Usually, the biggest sin in our day and age is having a lack of tolerance. And freedom and fun is more important than obedience and holiness. I want a religion that's free, makes me free and I have fun, not that makes me holy. C.S. Lewis said, man now is the judge, meaning he's got the black robe and the gavel, and God is in the dock, or God is on the one on trial. It's funny, I was just sent a text from my brother-in-law this morning, and his text was about this article, and the title is there room in the church for polyamorous priests? Is there room in the church for polyamorous priests? Do you guys know what polyamory is? So normal marriage is between a man and a woman. Polyamory means more. You can have a man and a woman and a woman, a man and a woman and a man and a woman. You can have 3 men and a woman. Is there room in the church for that? To even question that, there's something wrong. Like even if I say polyamory and it kind of washes over, you're like, yeah, I've heard of that term. We no longer are outraged or shocked. That means the Antichrist is doing a pretty good job. Here's a very troubling bit of research. In 1940, teachers identified top problem with their students. Here they are. 1940. Talking out of turn, chewing gum, making noise, running in the hall, cutting in line, dress code infraction, and littering. In 1990, they asked the same questions, and teachers said, drug use, alcohol abuse, pregnancy, suicide, rape, robbery, and assault. That's 1990. Could you imagine what it is now? What do you think happened between 1940 and 1990? Most scholars would say 2 things. Education replaced parenting when it comes to raising children. And the second thing is the belief that psychological progress of a child's self-esteem is more important than a child learning Christian moral teaching. I would add the third thing, and I would say this is probably the biggest reason. We have lost fear of God. So has the Antichrist. So, that's what he's like. What does he want? Well, he wants the same thing as the dragon. He wants power. Actually, the devil, when he got thrown out of heaven, Isaiah says he wants to now have his throne above God's. He wants to be like the Most High. He wants power. The moment Satan sinned, got thrown out, he was never happy. He wants more and more and more. And the same spirit is transferred to the Antichrist, who basically just wants to be in control over other people. And the Antichrist wants people to have that same attitude. I just want control. I like telling people what to do. I love being in charge. I love being on top. I love being it. Revelations 13:4 and 13:7 says he has been given authority by the dragon. He is given the ability a power to manipulate, like it's a real power. And he uses fear and false promises to move people. According to 1 John 5:19, the world, in the Greek cosmos, the system, is controlled by him. 2 Timothy 2:26 says, those who do not follow Christ have been taken captive to do his will. Ooh. So you could say he gets people to do what he wants them to do, or we need to look at it like this. There is no such thing as freedom. So either we follow Jesus or we follow Satan. And what happens if we're not following Jesus, then who are we following? But what happens when we follow Satan, he makes you believe you are free. He leads you to believe you are on your own. You are the master of your own world. And he does this through spin, lies. He's a master of spin. Those who are seduced by the spirit of the Antichrist are suckers for his lies, and he's a master of it. It says in John 8:44, Jesus says, Satan's the father of lies. He was born a liar. 2 Thessalonians 2:9-11 says his lies, when he comes back in bodily form, are going to be so impressive that everyone will believe his lie. He will lead the whole world astray. And if you accept lies easily, ask yourself why. Why are you so gullible? I think the problem with a lie, I was thinking through this, problem with a lie is it's always disguised as the truth. It always looks shiny and good. And not only that, the lie is designed this way. I can have now the thing I want without having to pay for it. That's the beauty of a lie. You don't believe me? In the desert, Satan had Jesus. He goes, hey, all you got to do is bow down to me and you can have the whole world. Was Satan bluffing? According to 1 John 5:19, no. He had the ability to give it out. But he said, all you got to do is bow down to me and you can have it right now. That's how lies work. You want it right now? Go ahead. Take it. I won't tell anybody. But here's the problem with attaining things through lies. There's always a cost, and the cost that comes later will always be more. There's always a cost, and the cost that comes later will always be more. If you ever watched Lord of the Rings, just throw the ring in the fire. No, why don't we hide it? Because it will be stronger the more you hide it. It's the same thing with sin. So my question is, why do you think, here's a couple questions. Do you think we live in a society that lies to us? No, they wouldn't lie to us. Do you think people are susceptible to liars? No. Do you think our politicians would ever lie to us? No. They're wonderful. They're great. And why do people believe their lies so easily? Because they would rather believe the lie if they get power than to live in truth and call it out. I want to win. I don't care if they're lying. Maybe we're just being primed for the actual day the Antichrist comes. I think the more easily we are lied to, the more persuasion he's going to have. And he's probably laughing like this. I love that kind of laugh. Anyhow, so we talked about what he's going to be like, what he wants, and then the last thing I want to look at, maybe the most terrifying aspect of it, and we find it in chapter 10 of Psalms. And the question is, how is he going to respond when he gets, people tell him his behavior is bad. He doesn't care. Look at, this is the one that, in a way, this is how you'll know if you really resemble him. Look at verse 6 of Psalm 10. He says to himself, so in verse 5, he's rejecting the laws, sneer at all his enemies, and in verse 6, he says to himself, you know what, nothing's ever going to shake me. No one will do me harm. In other words, what that means is nothing bad's going to happen to me. I'm going to get away with it. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine. And then verse 11, he says to himself, God will never notice. He covers his face, and he never sees. Look at verse 13. Why does the wicked man revile God? Why does he say to himself, he won't call me to account? He believes God doesn't know. He's an old man. God is so tired. You know how long God's been around? He's so tired up there. He's on his lazy boy, and he doesn't see what you do. So go ahead. Go ahead. I read this illustration, and this is his mindset. Let us ponder a fictional story of a bank robbery and the murder. A man comes into a bank with a gun. He demands that Agnes, a clerk, gives him all the money in her drawer. She pushes the alarm. Deet, 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 deet. He shoots and kills Agnes, runs out, and he jumps into a waiting car and escapes. Sometime later, Bernard James, a suspect, is arrested, tried on the testimony of Susan, who's the cashier that was next to Agnes. On her testimony, they found him guilty and they executed him. However, Susan's testimony was completely false. She only wanted revenge and for someone, anybody, to pay for her friend's death. She knew when she testified that James was not the murderer, but years later, Susan died, and she died peacefully in her sleep. For the liar, truth and justice are forever denied and buried in the graves of Susan and James. The inescapable truth of the spirit of the Antichrist is that injustice, they believe injustice in the grave are the end. Nobody sees, and it will just be covered over. And my question, is that true? God sees everything. But I believe this for a long time in my life. I saw this tendency in my pre-Christian life, and that brings me to the A slide. Pastors get a little nervous in my A slide. What my A slide is where I kind of go off topic and I just talk to you like me. It's called audacious, being audacious. I feel that I need to be honest. So, this A slide today is I'm going to tell you my story and my early admiration for the ways of the Antichrist. And I didn't know that's what I had admiration for, but I did. So, for me, his allure started with, you might not know what I'm talking about, but they're called wacky packages. And Darren Stevens from Bewitched. And you're like, what are you talking about? I was raised on TV. And there's a character, Darren Stevens, whose wife was beautiful, Samantha. And he was an advertising executive. I'm like, ooh, advertising, which wacky packages were, and Darren Stevens, you can have a house like him and a wife like him, and you can have a great life advertising the route. So I started looking at advertising. I realized, wow, advertising's right up my alley because I like art and I like communication. Fits perfectly. So I went to school to study marketing to get into advertising. Marketing, the basis of advertising, is the study of knowing what people want. It's the study of knowing what people want. It's figuring out what drives them so you can get them to buy your product. Why do you want them to buy your product? To make money. So marketing is about figuring you out so I can get money off of you. In other words, it's called manipulation. Companies spend billions on it a year. 3,000 ads are seen by your average child every day. 3,000. And what's crazy about that, advertising is built on being purposely vague in order to mislead. The objective is to use language that doesn't communicate anything. All it does is manufacture feeling and want. The objective is to produce feeling and want. Let me show you. 9 out of 10 dentists say Crest is the best toothpaste. Number one, who are these dentists? And what is the best? It's just the best. Well, what does best mean? I don't have to tell you, but it's the best. Or how about this one? In the 1970s, McDonald's said, you deserve a break today. You're right, I do. I deserve 7 Big Macs. Because, man, I've had a bad life, you know? I deserve to have the Happy Meal. Yeah, I deserve it. Burger King says you deserve to have it your way. Oh, it's about time somebody starts doing things my way. I'm going to Burger King. L'Oreal says, you know why you should buy L'Oreal? Because you're worth it. You're right. I should spend $250 on cosmetics because you know I'm worth it. I'm worth it. And man, they hook you in and they got you. Language isn't meant to communicate, it's to grab. So here's what I learned in class, and this was shocking. Here it is. You ready for this? This is about you. 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Well, what's 8 weeks? 8 weeks, according to a behavioral study, is how long people are satisfied with a new thing until they want another thing. So you want that car? 8 weeks until you want another car. 8 weeks. Everything is about new and improved. Why is everything new and improved? Because they know it's about 8 weeks. So everything has to be new. Fashion, Pop music, car styles, hairstyles, shoe styles, razor styles, Dorito brands. And if you don't have the new and improved can opener, you're missing out. And advertisers make it seem like, no, you're not missing out. You're a failure because Betty has it. Whoa, Betty has the new can opener? I don't have the new can opener. I better get the new can. Oh, advertising gotcha. They lie to you. They get you every day. So, the essence of advertising is getting rich through lying, and that's what I went to business for. I used to work downtown Chicago. I'd first go to sales and then go to advertising class. That's why I got this fancy suit on to impress you. See? I walk in this morning, people are like, oh, looking good. I said, we better all start dressing like this. Try that in Kent City. It does not go over well. But what happened is I took some classes on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, but then God found me there. He exposed me to my sin, and I soon left the business world, gave up a career in advertising, and exchanged the world for the Bible. Sweet manipulation was traded for unvarnished and sometimes painful truth. Very painful truth. The Bible's very painful sometimes. So like Neo, I once existed in the matrix, and I now swallowed the red pill, and I am now living in the true reality of a world, and I see it's all lies. God says, no more lies, Chris. About 10 years ago, I was talking to someone about how I left the world of advertising, and they asked me, have you ever seen the AMC show called Mad Men? I said, no, I've never heard of it. John Hamm plays this guy, Don Draper. So I turned it on and I watched it, and I was instantly hooked. And the reason I was instantly hooked is Don Draper was everything I wanted to become before I met Jesus. Everything. He had it all. But then I started watching and realized, even though he has it all, he's got a black soul. And then I read this article. It's called, Is Don Draper the Devil? And this is it. Listen to this. What do you think the devil is going to look like if he's around? Nobody's going to be taken in if he has long, red, pointy tail. He'll look attractive. He'll be nice and helpful. He'll get a job. Where he influences a great God-fearing nation, he will never do an evil thing. He'll just bit by little bit lower the standards where they are no longer important. He'll just coax you along through flash and not substance. And he'll get all the great women. When we meet Don Draper, he seemed downright close to perfect. The square jaw. You know what mewing is? The square jaw. That knowing look. The deft way he handled a cigarette and a woman. They say you got to kind of have a relaxed feel, like that. That he would flee this identity and make a career in advertising is a brilliant social commentary. Don Draper is, after all, the physical embodiment of spin. He lies to everyone all the time, and unlike most of TV's anti-heroes, he still looks great doing it. Don is morally bankrupt, even by the standards of the period. He cheats on his wife, he cheats on his mistress, he has no problem lying to the public, even if it means negating medical evidence that smoking can cause cancer. And the idea that his behavior needs to change does not seem to cross his mind, ever. Yet he still makes us swoon in his white shirts and Cary Grant hair, because Don is one of those guys who manages to seem as if he's trying to do the right thing when that is not his intention at all. In other words, he's the devil. That's the spirit of the Antichrist. Looking good, but lying all day. In one scene, he is selling cigarettes, and he knows they cause cancer, and he tells the client who's selling the cigarettes, he goes, you know what advertising is? It's that billboard on the side of the road that says, whatever you're doing, you're okay. You're okay. We become what we worship. And I'm afraid every single solitary day, we're buying that lie. That's why God sent His Son to show us the truth. And everything Jesus does is exactly the opposite. The Antichrist's arrogance is replaced by Jesus' humility. Even though he was God, he considered equality with God not something to be grasped, but he made himself nothing, even taking the form of a servant, even dying the death on the cross. Place of power and control, he became utterly dependent. John 5:19 says, I do only what I see my Father doing. People have said Jesus is the most dependent person who ever lived. And instead of accountability, he was completely submissive. He did what the Father wanted, and he obeyed him, and he's accountable to him. And so he says, son though he was, Hebrews writes, he learned obedience from what he suffered, and once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey. Submission. Not freedom, submission. So the question is this. Here's the question. Who do you resemble? And I'd be careful how you answer, because the last time we read about the beast, the very last thing it says in Revelation 19:20, the beast was captured, and with the false prophet, the two of them were thrown alive in a fiery lake of burning sulfur. Talk about a zero. Never forget one thing I said earlier. The problem with attaining things through lies is that the cost always comes later, and it will always be more.